data center. So there's a lot of a lot of nesting organizations, and I'm the co-creator along with Bruno Sousa and Wilhelm Franco of the Rice Spatial Studies Lab of roadsTaken. It's an interactive map. So this should be an interactive talk. So I'm going to ask everyone to go ahead and pull up a browser window. I like looking at things that relate to my Zoom talk, so I think everyone should too, and head over to roadsTaken.org. Roadstaken.org so that you can view the website kind of as it's intended as you're learning about this history. So roadstaken.org. I'll just quickly, while everyone's pulling that up, if you need a hyperlink, I'm putting it in the chat right now. There you go, roadstaken.org. And we started this project. I came to GIS from a history background, sort of, I think, unusual for most folks. And we realized, and I think the exciting thing is, we wanted to figure out the answers to two really big questions, which was who was displaced by highway construction in Houston and why were they displaced? And we quickly realized that we couldn't do this research without it being an intensive, GIS project. So we needed GIS to do our research. And we also realized that we couldn't share this information with the public and with policymakers without it being, a GIS project. So those two went together. So hopefully everyone's pulled up the website now, and you should be looking at a page like this, roadstaken.org. And I'm going to start off the first part of my talk by just introducing. I think if you're not from Houston, you might not know, but Houston's urban freeway system is currently expanding with two major urban freeway expansions. So it's deep in our local news, but it's also deep in Houston's history. I-45, commonly known around here as the Gulf Freeway, was the nation's first modern limited access superhighway. And its routing and the routing of the whole highway system goes back to visions from Houston city fathers and landscape architects in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. After I introduce the website, I'll talk about their top-down and technocratic vision, and then, hopefully in a way that's useful to all of you, my GIS colleagues, walk you through our research methodology step by step. And then finally, I'll talk about how our research uncovered the way these plans and visions led to a disproportionate displacement and impact on Houston's Black communities. So what are you looking at roadstaken.org? Well, as you can see, it's centered around a map of Houston that we constructed using the ArcGIS suite of programs. And at the very top, your main navigation tool is going to be our time slider. As you advance the time slider, um, houses that were cleared to make way for highways are removed from the map, and the highways themselves at the date of opening appear. As you go further and further in time, we have a little tracker here that connects to the database that I'm going to talk about that shows how many buildings were cleared and an estimate of the demographics of the residents who lived in those buildings. This displaced residents tool has two different calculations that you can switch between: our best estimate and a detailed connection with census rolls that I'll talk about. You can also display this demographic information on the map by pressing the demographics button. You can pull up the legend anytime to get a look at what you're viewing, and you can also interact with the map in some interesting ways. You can select a building, and that will bring up links to data of who lived in that building in 1940 or 1950. You can also hover over any building, for example, Mount Corinth Baptist Church here, to pull up information that we collected about that place, along with a little display of who lived there. Um, as you're navigating the map and maybe investigating a neighborhood that's of interest to you, you can put on overlays of useful information, like matching it with the 30s Hulk redlining map, or putting up information about the location of Houston's industrial zones, Houston's wards, if you're unfamiliar with the geography of the city, or summary charts of the displacement by each highway section. You can also pull up some important maps that I'm going to talk about later from early city planning. At the bottom of the map, we have a big media gallery, which you can navigate to georeferenced historical photos of highway construction. You can also overlay mosaics we've made of aerial imagery of the cities at various dates, and a full list of historical city maps and every single major thoroughfare and freeway plan the city published during this time. And you can also view a gallery of newspaper articles that are related to highway construction. So if you get lost at any time, take a look at the user guide, and it will walk you through some of the ways you can navigate the map. So please ignore ignore parts of my talk and feel free to look around and play around in the map as I'm talking you through the history, the methodology, and some of the consequences of our research. So that's how you navigate our interactive map. Let me talk now about the history that we began investigating as part of this project. Just a big picture context for highway planning and modern freeway development in the post-war is over the last 100 years, out of the fields of architecture, particularly landscape architecture, there emerged a class of highway planners and urban designers that were empowered by sort of two twin things, right? Federal directives to build a network of safe, fast, and efficient modern highways to replace the slapdash roads of the past, and of course the increasing use of automobiles throughout the United States. From the beginning, this national community of highway professionals, roadway professionals, saw building new roads as a way to clear unwanted areas. To quote, many cities have blighted areas slated for redevelopment. Where they are near general desire lines of travels, arterial routes might be located through them in coordination with slum clearance and redevelopment programs. We can see this sort of demonstrated in an example map from the same document I just quoted. In Houston, planners applied these national ideas with pretty much a free hand. I was wondering, when I first started this project, I sort of came in with an incorrect assumption that these highways were probably designed by someone in Austin or DC, and they decided where the highways were going to go through the urban landscape of Houston, but that ended up being completely incorrect. That national idea of slum clearance and state infrastructure building was absolutely present in Houston. So I went down a huge archival rabbit hole as a historian to try and find who exactly was in charge of planning the location of these freeways and archives in Houston and Austin. And I found that the freeways, the original freeway plan was developed by Houston's first, official permanent employee city planner, Ralph Ellifrit, who spent his early working years as an intern for the prestigious Kansas City architecture firm Hare and Hare, who just happened to be the folks who designed Houston's first city plan under the direction of, founding city father Will C. Hogg. And as I connected the dots, it became clear that Houston decided where it wanted to put its freeways, and those ideas for where those freeways went were completely wrapped up in the vision of this first city plan published in 1929. So I took a look at that first city plan, and I think I saw a couple people from Austin who should be familiar with this type of thing. I think there was something similar in Austin in 1928, which is that as part of the plan, Houston did a very detailed map of its racial geography, mapping block by block who lived where, white or black. You can see this map on the left or on roadsTaken.org under important maps, Houston's race distribution, and also proposed that a series of race restriction zones, noting, quote, a scheme of voluntary segregation of the races can be worked out from street openings and other improvements. This is because, city ordinance racial segregation was, technically unconstitutional. So it had to be accomplished through other means. And this is where, GIS played such an important role in the actual research process, right? By georeferencing these historical maps, overlaying them on a modern projection or on top of each other, we could quickly see like what this vision was for Houston's black communities. This is the Fourth Ward, or the historic Freedmen's Town, as UNESCO World Heritage Site today, and Houston's first black neighborhood. And you can see here in red the racial or race restriction areas overlaid over the map of Houston's race distribution. And you can see the Fourth Ward being reduced in size on the north and on the east. And one of my amazing interns put this quick map together of all of the city projects that over the next 20 years that accomplished exactly what this map set out. We had a whites only public housing segment, a road, a Buffalo Drive or Allen Parkway, the city civic center here, and then I-45 through the Fourth Ward. As Texas highway engineer noted all the way later in 1968, it is important to remember that the urban highway can be a valuable tool in rehabilitating such slum areas. So highways were just one method the city accomplished it, but I would argue that it became the city's most important tool to accomplish this. So you can see on roadsTaken.org, you can overlay the initial proposed freeway map put together by Elifrit in coordination with the Texas Highway Department, right, which shows all of Houston's modern urban freeways with the exception of Highway 288, the South Freeway, and US 59/I-69, which are not on the map yet. But you can see that these freeways went through black neighborhoods and in many cases lined up perfectly for what the new boundaries of these neighborhoods should be, and also corresponded heavily with how homes were assessed during the New Deal. This is the redlining map of Houston, which I'm sure folks are familiar with. We found that of the original proposed freeways, only 33 homes were ever cleared in neighborhoods designated A and B. So GIS is absolutely essential to me navigating this historical documents, doing this research, and it was also essential to find the conclusions, to go back and answer our question, like who was actually displaced. So now I'm going to talk about how do we map this lost city, this lost part of Houston? How do we map people being displaced by the highway? So at the very beginning of this project, I came up with just a quick architecture for our research, and I figured if we want to know who was displaced, we had to look at the actual buildings because that's what we had records of, and find a way to connect them. So we designed our research plan around two ingests: mapping buildings and collecting data on people, with the idea that these could be linked together and then displayed for the public and policymakers. And then we found some other things we wanted to do with the data, other sources of data, and other outputs. So, historical GIS data is really messy. Let me give you one example here. A lot of our mapping had to be done with something I'm sure a lot of folks are familiar with. They're absolutely fascinating. Sanborn fire insurance maps, which have detailed maps down to the building of neighborhoods, and they were updated through, from the after the Civil War up through the 1950s and 60s. However, often corrections on these maps, because they were constantly being updated, meant that myself and our student interns had to pull out bright lights and magnifying glasses to see what was underneath these maps and try and get a digitization of them where we could see what had been corrected over. And then, of course, we found that there were different versions of archived sets of these map books. So, we're lucky in some cases to find some that didn't have these corrections. And we also found, thanks to the Texas Department of Transportation Houston District, a huge set, not complete, of right-of-way maps that were made when these highways were planned. But again, they're very difficult for machines and for people to read. As you can see, this map here, which is in Pleasantville in northeast Houston, right, shows details and addresses of 20 buildings, but they're overlaid with the digitization makes it very hard to see. But they have a ton of information, not just addresses, right? They have information on the type of dwelling, the number of stories, who was the owner in the case of the right-of-way maps. But we found that no one set of historical documents was complete for the scope of our study. So we had to, use different approaches for different sets of materials and combine them. Then began a massive campaign of georeferencing these historical maps on modern projections. Breaking out, ArcGIS Pro and pinning things and getting these maps as accurate as possible using modern buildings and modern streets as a reference. Then we had to, turn these maps into some type of data. And we initially tried, the sort of pro image analysis, deep learning models to try and train pro to trace these buildings and collect the information for us. We couldn't get it to work in a way that would actually save us any time, just because of the nature of these digitizations. It would draw parcels as buildings. The buildings near parcel lines just didn't work. And of course, it didn't collect any of the actual data that was really important to us, which was the address of these buildings, the type of building, the number of stories. So all of these buildings, after these maps were georeferenced, had to be traced by a human being. And the information that's on the map, right? You and I can tell that this says, 753 Danville Street, but it was very difficult to get any machine to recognize it. So we had to record this information by hand. I'm reminded of the scene in the HBO TV show Chernobyl, right? Where machines don't work, so we'll use bio robots. And that's what we did. Thanks to a partnership with Fondren Library through their Fondren Fellows program, we were able to get a bunch of incredibly talented and passionate student interns that wanted to learn GIS and contribute to a meaningful project. So train them in how to use the software and how to execute the tasks we need. And that's how we create our geodata, along with me doing it as well. And so after about a year of work and probably getting several thousand person hours of labor, here's the map halfway through, we were able to map every building in the right-of-way of Houston's urban freeways from 1946 through 1974. So that completed our first ingest of building information. Second, we needed information about people. And we had, we have census tract data, but we wanted to be as specific as possible. And thankfully, right before we started this project, the 1950 census rolls were released. And for a large number of our highways, the 1940 or 1950 census had information about people who were living in what would become a highway. So we scraped a bunch of data, use some OCR, and the contributions of other people translating this handwritten census rolls by census takers into a tabular format. So we were able to pull, I think it was like 300,000 records from the 1940 and 1950 census. How do we know which of those people were actually displaced by highways? Well, there's some limitations that I'll talk about in a second, but we just use Microsoft Access SQL to find matches based on common attributes, a simple, field join. We found this was doing this outside of Pro gave us a lot more options for refining and testing before we moved things back to our GIS software. So we wrote a join function matching people displaced by highways based on their address, house number, and street name. And where we found those, we knew we had a match, and we could go back and check and see, hey, does this make sense based on the other information? Is this match correct? And then boom, we knew that these people lived in this building from our database created from historical maps. So that got us one source of data, and you can see this by clicking on the census roll or again using that hover tool. Next, when you click on a building, you can see now this info about residents. And again, if you want, I'll put the link the links on my last slide. If you want any of our data, right? If you ever want to try and replicate this, our full data is located in the RICE research repository. So we also continue to update our database using some other historical sources like city directories, which we used to check. And we found that after this, well, okay, this was really good for highways built in the 1940s or the early 1950s. But after that, this information was no longer accurate. The streets, too many people had moved and changed. There was too big of a lag time between when we had our data and when we actually needed our data. So we added historical census tract information to every single house based on its very precise location, which of course is less precise, but provide us with a greater coverage, which is what you see when you have the estimate button clicked. So this data is not perfect, right? We only know the address data from census rolls for 1940 and 50. However, unless something terrible happens, I'll be back in 2032 to look at the 1960 census when it's released. Plus, we have this big lag time, right? We have these points of data. There was no American Community Survey back during the day. So if a building was cleared in, let's say, 1968, we only know our most recent point was 1960. So these are all, really big estimates, but we feel like we did the best we could with the available historical data. And then what does this look like once we get onto the map, right? Well, we can see we've got a visual representation that we were able to just create in ArcGIS Online. And then with ArcGIS Experience Builder Developer Edition, my co-author Bruno wrote a little script for a nice hover tool to display the information about a building in a way that's publicly facing and public friendly. Let's see, checking my time on this. I want to make sure we have plenty of time for some of the great questions we're getting in the chat. We're also able to go through these city directories and find more information, especially about commercial buildings, like the name of the building, to give users of the map a better feel of what this, let's say this is the Dowling kind of commercial drag, what it felt like there before there was a highway built through it. We also collected just, as part of our research and doing this, right, tons of other useful archival information. TxDOT was kind enough to share photos from their huge photo library of highway construction. And so Bruno and William at the Spatial Studies Lab wrote us a nice little experience builder where I could share this with my students, and with a couple of clicks, they could draw a shape in ArcGIS that would represent a view cone for that photo. And because my interns had been working so closely with these sections of highways, it was no problem for them to be like, yeah, I know exactly where this photo was taken. This is, about over Main Street looking to the west. And then those became the photo gallery you see when you click that little camera icon. And then we were able to compile all of our other historical documents like newspapers and other historical maps into these other four icons, right? Aerials, maps, plans, and important documents. The final product was built in ArcGIS Experience Builder Developer Edition. Most of what we have, right, is a little off the shelf, but we programmed some sort of fancier widgets to get some, I suppose, at least to me, more aesthetically pleasing menu buttons and things. And you can also, we're able to embed all of our full research articles and narratives. So if you have some questions about our methodology or our results that you didn't get to answer, click that research button and you can read those full articles. All right, I've got to talk for about 7 or 8 more minutes on one last section before we get to questions, now that I've gone over our methodology, which is what did this all result for us, right? Who were these highways for, and what was the result of this massive period of construction over these 3 decades in Houston? Well, and you can view these charts interactively, again, built with ArcGIS Experience Builder in the consequences section of the research thing. But we found that despite the population of Houston and the greater Houston area being about 20% Black, that the people displaced by highway construction during this period were majority Black Houstonians. We estimate that around 21,000 people had to move as a result of their homes or dwellings being taken by the government to build these highways. And 53% is our best estimate, and it's quite disproportionate compared to 20% of the population. And if people have questions, we also did some estimates of Hispanic Houston population, not recorded by the census officially for a lot of this time period, though that didn't stop some census takers from recording this. But we used some matching of some common Hispanic surnames, plus, because we had the detailed information from our census rolls, whether a person was born or their parents were born in a Hispanic country, or whether they listed Spanish as their native language. And we kind of wrote a little filter. It's not perfect, but it gives us some estimate of Hispanic displacements. So again, if you want to view these interactively, where you can click on each one and see the full data, they're in our consequences section under research. And by pressing the demographics button, you can also see them visually on the map, switch between estimate and census roll to change the display so you can see graphically. And it helps you understand, right, that, especially, for example, in Northeast Houston, the 5th Ward, there were incredibly intense displacements as an entire interchange was built over essentially the heart of that neighborhood. You can also view the total displacements by clicking the overlays button and displacement summary chart. Because we decided to collect so much historical information when we were creating this map, we were able to then do analyses that we weren't really even anticipating, like looking at the displacement and removal of commercial buildings, of businesses. And the Texas Highway Department did a lot of studies of this and found that, if a highway went through your business, it tended to be pretty bad for your business. And we also noted that the largest concentrations of commercial buildings, commercial districts, if you will. Half of them, or about half of them, were in Black communities, and another good chunk were right on the borders of these Black neighborhoods. And there's also a chart in the consequences chapter where you can look at the breakdown by building type. Obviously, to talk about the consequences of this, Houstonians did not, meekly acquiesce to highways being built by the city, state, and the feds through their homes. In the early 70s, there was a massive period of protests against these freeways. Interesting in our study is that the vast majority of freeway displacements had already taken place by the time these protests gained steam and entered the public conversation. Houstonians also recorded in their memoirs or oral histories, right, their opinions of these highways being built through Black neighborhoods. The third ward in Houston, according to activist and planner Ernie Atwell, that highway set the third ward back. In the third ward, you have a larger ratio of undeveloped land to the total land that you normally have. That transportation problem became a development problem for the third ward. By the 1960s, Ralph Ellifrit, our sort of leading freeway designer in Houston, had retired and was replaced by Roscoe Jones, who talked about we should usher in a more democratic and less great designer mentality when city planning. He said in an interview with the Houston Chronicle, "We shouldn't slow down our freeway building program, but there's a limit to how many freeways we can build. Eventually, vital parts of the city will have to be destroyed for more freeways." I would say counter to what Planner Jones said here, vital parts for those communities that the freeways went through had already been destroyed, right? There was still a perception of what constituted a vital part. Despite his shift in rhetoric, Houston continued the expansion and construction of highways during his tenure in Black neighborhoods, completing the North Loop, that's 610, through Cashmere Gardens, the construction of the South Freeway in Riverside Terrace, and the widening of the Gulf Freeway, that's I-45, in the Third Ward. Our conclusion is that from 1946 to 1975, approximately 21,000 Houstonians were displaced by freeway construction, including around 11,100 Black residents. This is equivalent to 11.8% of Harris County's Black population in 1940, before freeway construction began. Planners soon realized that displacement had more severe impacts on renters, low-income residents, and non-white communities. While planners may not have viewed the neighborhoods and commercial districts affected by freeway construction as vital parts of the city, they were essential to the communities that lived there. Where planners saw blighted areas and slums, residents saw thriving neighborhoods filled with businesses, homes, schools, civic and cultural institutions. In Houston, highways feel as permanent, neutral, and natural as our bayous and our awful humidity. But if highway planners today blindly follow unequal plans and our current ideas about infrastructure without examining their impacts, we risk perpetuating the injustices of the past in the future. Highways and roads don't serve all people equally. Recalling the Fourth Ward community's feelings about the freeway built through the neighborhood, resident Myrtle Ross recalled, "We didn't like it. We weren't excited about it because it wasn't helping us. The freeway project was just displacing a lot of Black people. Policymakers must consider exactly who our roads are built to help and who they're built to harm." Thank you so much for listening to me talk about our research project. roadsTaken.org. If you have any suggestions or feedback outside of this talk, my email is on the website and on this PowerPoint. And if you want to read more about the information, our full suite of research articles is on that research section. There's the web address to download our full set of census data and map layer files and even the experience builder shell. What I hope is that at least some parts of our methodology might inspire historians or planners or GIS folks in other cities to take what we found as useful or enlightening about this project and apply it to where you specialize and where you work. Plus, we're working on some other increased aspects of it. But thank you again, and thank you to GPN Texas for inviting me.
Hey, thanks, Matt. That was super interesting.
Thank you, brother.
Even the second time. So we got a couple of questions in the chat. One directly, did you consult with Dr. Carol McDavid at Rice Anthropology Adjunct?
No, funny enough, I have not, but it's on my list of people to talk to. I believe I have worked with one of her students here in the GIS lab here at our university's library. So I will definitely reach out to her for further collaboration. Thank you, Ellen.
Yep. Yep. And I was just thinking, personally, I kind of grew up near 610 while it was under construction, but it was before I was born, before things were displaced. So, and it didn't look like there was a whole lot right there anyway. So, but yeah, it's pretty bad throughout the rest of the third ward anyway. Other questions? Oh, do you know of anything that's been equivalent to roadsTaken along I-35 in Austin?
No, I would love if you're from Austin and you know the layout of the local archives and stuff, please reach out to me. I've looked at some of the publicly available stuff for I-35 construction, and it seems like Austin, again, I'm just speculating here because I haven't done the full research for Austin. There's a lot of similarities. They had in the late 20s a plan that had a plan for racial segregation. The highway plans came shortly thereafter, and there's some interesting correlations or possible, causations there. But I would love to talk to someone in Austin who has lay of, what available documents there are. But yeah. So I haven't. I've just briefly looked at their plans and stuff. But if you're from Austin, please reach out to me. I'd love to take a look at what you might know.
Yeah, I can see this could, I mean, all the major cities in Texas had the same kind of work being done. So San Antonio, Austin,
Yeah.
Dallas, Fort Worth, yeah, they could all.
Yeah. Fort Worth even had the same consulting firm, Hair and Hair. They really got around Texas.
Yeah. All right. So this is an early question. You may have answered it, but how did you find the highway-related newspaper articles that you incorporated into roadsTaken?
Yeah. Good old historian reading through the papers. Thankfully, this, you know, 20 years ago would have been done on microfiche film, but there's digitized versions that are text searchable that are available through our archive, and so that's how we found a lot of it. But of course, shout out to the archivists at the Houston History Research Center at the Houston Public Library, who got us started and have created vertical files of clippings of important highway related newspaper articles that we wouldn't even known where to look without those archivists.
Okay, well, I'm scrolling through the chat. Ellen recommended newspapers.com is great for old newspapers.
Yep.
Yeah, and I talked to you about this previously, but I was impressed with the all the pictures and the way that they had the cones of the view shed cone on them. And you said you manually had to draw those in, right?
Exactly. But And shout out to Bruno, who developed this tool as part of another project called Imagine Rio, like Rio de Janeiro. And so we had to draw those manually, but we got it where a non, GIS expert level could do it in 3 clicks.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
so it was as easy as point of origin, distance, and then create the the angle of the view
Mhm.
cone sight lines.
Yep.
Hey guys, let me just jump in here. I got
Sure.
a few more questions. I think you pretty much got these, Matt, and Robert's been grabbing them, but someone had asked early on, how did you data scrape census info? Those are notorious difficult to read. Did you already address that? I think you did, but
Yeah, I had the uh benefit of having a really talented younger sister who helped me write some code for taking other people's tabular other people's tabular versions of the census that were hosted on web pages and pulling those page by page. So we took available OCR of census data from and scrape that by just loading a page, copying the important fields, loading another page. I could have never programmed that, so shout out to my little sister who helped me.
that's awesome.
Yeah,
And I'm pretty sure you went over this, but what was the metric for determining likely Hispanic? I think had talked about that quite a bit, but
yeah. The full
just want to
details
reiterate
are
that.
in head to research and then methodology, and I talk a little bit about it in consequences. But basically, and there's a fascinating history here in that, depending on the neighborhood, Hispanic Houstonians at certain points of the census might be labeled Spanish, white, black, Mexican, and it was often geographically based. If you were living in a black neighborhood, you might be labeled Mexican, even though that wasn't one of the official categories for that year's census. What we ended up doing is taking all of those, if a census taker put down something like Mexican, plus the list of the 200 most common Spanish surnames, plus people who listed Spanish as their first language, plus people who were born in a list of Latin American countries, plus people whose parents were born in a list of Latin American countries. And we ran that, looked at that data and say, okay, do we have any things that stick out as unusual? Or are we accidentally getting a lot of people who probably would have identified as Italian American or something like that? No. Okay, we did a little cleaning, and then if they said yes to any of those, they were put in as likely Hispanic. And if you go to our specific charts, you can you can see the breakdown of and if you can expand this one of what they were originally recorded by census takers as. So were they recorded as white, black, or as Latino or Mexican in the census? But yeah, great question.
Sweet. We've got a bunch of comments in here too. I'll try to grab a couple. It's one gentleman saying I-35 and MOPAP Loop 1 projects had racial displacement agendas. I-35 created a physical barrier while MOPAP pushed Black residents to East Austin by stating they would not have essential municipal city services installed, but those services were in East Austin. Later, those municipal services were installed. A small percentage of Black residents stayed while the majority bought into the untruth. So I'm sure you probably ran into things like that as well.
Yeah, just as an example, I think if you talk to most Houstonians, they consider this area of the city to be Houston's third ward, right? South of I-45. And we had a similar phenomenon. We had a highway through what was at the time the middle of the neighborhood. And then later, the highway becomes the barrier to the neighborhood. So
Mm, 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 mm.
same as with some of these examples from Austin, right? A highway goes through a neighborhood and then it becomes the edge of that neighborhood or the barrier to that neighborhood.
Right. What was the time period for this project? How long did it take?
Let's see. I started in June of 2022, and we published our first publicly available version in September 20, no, sorry, October 2024. So it took a little over 2 years. Myself working on it full time. My two co-authors, Bruno and Wilvum, working on it part time, off and on, plus 5 interns working, a couple hundred hours each. So yeah, 2 years and a lot of work.
Excellent. Um, those old maps georeferenced are amazing. We're getting a lot of great feedback for you, by the way. But someone said, can we grab the web services for those layers hosted by Rice in your application?
Let's see. I think so. I think the map is on ArcGIS is publicly available. If you search for roads taken, you should be able to see the web map that this experience builder is connected to, and you should be able to download the data. And also, if you want, if you go to the hyperlink that is in the PowerPoint, and I can just copy and paste it into the chat. You can
Super.
download the layer files all zipped up, the shape files. There's the
Sweet.
link to our archive on the Rice
Thank
Research
you.
Repository. Yeah.
A couple more questions here. What types of local community outreach and sharing at community level are happening after this amazing research? Is local Houston communities to share this with them? Or excuse me, in local Houston communities to share this with them?
Yeah, I haven't since completing this project. I started a brand new wonderful position at the library's GIS data center. So I've sort of been very busy becoming taking on a new role over the past 6 months. So the answer is not a lot. Through our amazing Rice University historian Portia Hopkins, used parts of this map in her work with the community of Pleasantville. But other than that, I'm not aware of any other things, but I would like to do that. Yeah. So
Okay.
that's sort of on me. I've fallen behind on my community outreach and sharing plan after publication, but my lame excuse is I got a new job. Um,
It's not lame. It's a lot to start a new job. Okay, let's see. Can you reshare your experience trying to use ArcGIS Pro's AI tools to scrape scanned maps and documents?
Yeah, so what happened is, we made some like nice mosaics of the historical images of Sanborn maps and, did the sort of deep learning image analysis and did a little training. And we just discovered the data was too messy. There's too many, I guess if I go back to show an example of the maps, the data was too messy. There were so many incorrect polygons that were lot lines. We couldn't get the data to deal with these little hashed marks on the documents. The scans of the right-of-way maps, just because they often show the highway lines like this, just couldn't work. And the ones for color worked way better, but we only had really good digitizations of the color ones for much older maps, like turn of the century. This right here is a photograph I took in the archive. So I have a feeling that, and maybe this is wish casting, maybe it's true. Is that some of the like new AI imagery analysis tools are much better at training at this and would be way better than what we were working with because we did this when we started the project, like so summer of and early fall of 2020. I think I am really curious in exploring I think it's called the forest-based classification tool to deal with a bunch of the unknown buildings that we have and give us a best estimate of like, hey, what was this building, right? Where the map's information on what kind of building it was obscured or not present. So yeah, that was our experience. It definitely it made some data, but it didn't get the data we wanted, and it was so much cleaning, and there were so many nuances. We felt it was better to have an expert in that. And my interns and myself really became experts in these neighborhoods as they looked at them.
I'm sure. Um, Someone is asking, have you presented this at the ION or ION?
Um,
Not familiar with what that is, but
oh, is that is this Ellen? Ellen, do you mean
Ellen,
the rice ion? Uh, no, but I'd love to. If
feel free to unmute if you want to
yeah.
clarify your question.
Yeah. Rachel says this could be great for local high school students. Stay tuned, Rachel. In September, I have an article that it's still in draft mode, but it'll be ready by September because I got to present it at a conference. Roads taken in the classroom, aimed particularly at upper level high school students and undergraduates.
And Ellen did clarify, yes, that one.
Yeah, I would love to present it at the Ion, but I'm not sure how I'd do that. But yeah, and
Okay,
I did
maybe Ellen,
see
you can connect him there.
in the chat, someone was asking about a self-published book about Houston highways. It's Houston Freeways by Eric Slotboom, and you can find it at most Houston libraries. Finding a copy to purchase can be difficult. It was indispensable in doing this project. Could have never been done without uh, uh, Eric Slotboom's work. If he had never published Houston Freeways, there would have been too much archival information for us to go through, too much orientation to do. So huge shout out to Eric for his book.
Excellent. We got a few more comments. Let's see. Very insightful information, Matt. Thank you for the research and for shedding some light on this historical displacement of people. Glad GIS was utilized to see what others couldn't see, measure the displacement rate and those affected during road construction projects in the Houston area. Great work. The census data is not public from 1960 onwards. Did you get a special permit to use the data past 1950?
I did not. It had become, the 72-year mark had just happened the April before we started this project. But I've got I have a calendar alert for April 2032 when that 60 census comes out.
Excellent. Let's see, what were some of the other comments we got? I think I got most of these. Very cool project. Nice job. There's some great comments in here if you have time to go through them.
Thank you
Refreshing
everyone for the
presentation.
kind words.
Amazed by all the legwork researching historical documents. The visual of the displacement among the modern roadbed represented in base map was sobering. It's good.
Yeah, and shout out to Will, our co-author. He's got a great eye for design. And if you're interested in any of the other projects that he and Bruno are working on, check out the Spatial Studies Lab it's part of Rice's Center for Research Computing. They've done some amazing maps of glacier receding, of Rio de Janeiro, of the Mars rovers. They do some really amazing GIS stuff.
Sweet.
And I mean, it was just happenstance. We were in the same office hallway and got to know each other. And yeah, so shout out to being stuck in an office next to someone who's really awesome.
I think that's all. I mean, there's probably some comments I didn't miss. Robert, was there anything else you wanted to jump in? I didn't mean to kind of
No,
take
no,
over
no,
there, but
no, that's perfect. Like I
okay.
warned earlier, I was a bit frazzled today. I did want to point out someone was asking about getting access to the data from ArcGIS Online services, and that's what it looks like. I use the GeoHound plugin for your browser, and it'll point out every map service that's on a service. So if you're ever on, some site and it's got a map and it's you can use GeoHound and it'll point out what the URL is to your map service that you're interested in.
Oh, dope.
Thanks again, Matt. Thanks everybody for coming in. Hopefully I'll be able to post this recording soon. And because it is recording. And so we'll be able to see that. And then a reminder that there is another speaker series in August. So we look forward to seeing y'all there. Anything else, Maya?
No, thank you again for having me. Anyone and everyone, if you have questions or want to collaborate in any way, please reach out to me. My email address is on there, or you can just find me by Googling Rice GIS, and that's our webpage.
Wonderful. Yes, I was just going to say contact information. No, nothing else for me, Matt. That was excellent. Thank you so much for your time, and it was very interesting. And yeah, everyone will be posting this up on YouTube shortly. So stay with us and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you again, Maya. Thank you again, Robert. I really appreciate this opportunity, and looking forward to the next one.
Wonderful. We're so glad to have you, Matt. Appreciate your help.
All right, y'all take care. Have a good one.
You too. Bye-bye.